I would never deny anyone's struggle and say, oh, you're stupid, or that's not true, or you're lazy. It's not that. We've created a label called ADHD. It's an abbreviation of 4 words, and who chose the 4 words was a committee. But there's no need to get reactive. There's no need to hurt someone else. We could have easily left him on inhalers for the rest of his life. That's when my questioning started. Like, something's not working. I'm an expert in my son, and I have 10 years of research in ADHD. I have some education. Had he been on medication, who knows what would have happened, but maybe our relationship wouldn't have been as authentic. It would have been like, here, take your meds, now I love you. I feel like there might have been a bit more of a disconnect of like really being 2 human beings like with flaws.
How can we lead in a household without controlling? Today on Walk With Me Brother, we are sitting down with someone who has reshaped the way thousands of families think about behavior, stress, and the environments that children grow up in. Roman Wyden is a filmmaker, podcast host, and the creator of ADHD Is Over, a global movement that is challenging the traditional narrative around ADHD. His journey started when his son received a diagnosis that just didn't sit right with him. Most parents accept the system. Roman questioned it. The labels, the medication, the idea of a broken child, and even his own role as a father. That curiosity has launched a 6-year mission into trauma, the nervous system, childhood wounds, emotional safety, and the real story behind behavior. He has interviewed some of the world's renowned experts like Gabor Maté, Bruce Lipton, and Stephen Porges, built a major documentary, and now conscious parenting and regulation in the home. Roman, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. You've driven all the way from Ojai, and those who don't know Ojai, it's one of my favorite places on this planet. Beautiful part of, it's Northern LA. It's out of LA. It's Ventura County, is it?
Yeah.
Beautiful. If you've never been there, it's just lavender paradise, as I call it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always like to start at the beginning. Before we go back to your childhood, I just would like for you to give yourself an intro to obviously who you are and what brings you in today and talking about.
Thanks first of all, for having me. I appreciate what you're doing, Rob. And also thanks for the great intro. It's good to hear my own bio read by someone else, or part of my life, right? And just to remind me what I'm up to, right? So thanks for that. But yeah, I, in a nutshell, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a creative. I'm somebody who's now invested in perhaps creating a different version of mental health, a future of mental health in this country or globally. I'm also a father of 2 teenage boys who I love so dearly. We're just amazing young men. And I'm also just a questioner of systems, like I do wake up in the morning, and when I hear any bit of news, I just question, not for the sake of questioning, but that's just me wanting to find out, is it working for everyone involved or is it not? So in a nutshell, that's who I am,
You're someone who's built an entire movement really changing how society looks, right? So let's start right there. So how would you describe the work that you do today?
I think right now I'm a podcast host, author, and really a consultant for anyone who's interested in aligning their lives, right? It's kind of like, I call it, I'm an alignment coach. It's a bit like, chiropractic work, where if one item or one area is out of alignment, there's other areas that are suffering, right? So I help people kind of put this back in alignment. So that's kind of what I do is I'm coaching, I'm questioning, and I'm reporting about it in the podcast, in the documentary, in the book.
Thank you for watching Walk With Me Brother. We are a relatively new podcast. Without your support, without your help, we cannot grow. So please subscribe. Please give us a thumbs up. Please share our episodes. We've got every single week. We have entrepreneurs, doctors, veterans, people, experts within their field, all talking everything related to mental health. So if you haven't catched our previous episodes, go and watch them now. But follow us along and please support our amazing journey. Perfect. I love it. Just putting everything back into order. So we spoke there briefly just off camera. You're from Switzerland.
Yeah.
So take me back to your childhood, where you're from, what brought you to the States. But yeah, going back to obviously what was your childhood like?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Switzerland. There's about 8,000 people lived there at the time. It was a beautiful mountain town. Everything was very idyllic, you could say, on paper, or as I always say on a postcard, it looked like paradise, right? And by the way, we invented OCD. The Japanese think they did, but I think really the Swiss invented this sort of, everything has to be, maybe it was the German influence, but, we're very precise and very clean, and everything looks on the surface like it's working well. I think left brain, sort of industrial, systems, yes. But right brain and sort of the emotional awareness and the creativity at the time when I was growing up, now looking back in hindsight, there was a lot of stuff that was swept under the rug. My parents were there physically. They did the best they could. We were upper middle class. We had enough money. We did well. It looked like it was a happy Swiss family. We had a hotel, so we were part of a hotel family. And
very nice.
But now looking back, they weren't emotionally available. Mm-hmm. They were so stressed. They were both working so much.
The hospital, I worked in that life.
Right?
Yeah, it's full on.
I mean, I don't blame them. They did the best they could, like I said. But now looking back, there was just a lot of pretending all is well and hiding things from us so that we wouldn't be impacted in a negative way. Like, oh, I don't want you to worry. Or someone died, but they didn't tell us somebody in the family passed away because, it's death. And so there was just a lot of stuff hidden. And I see this now in my sort of adolescent years where I became good at hiding things, secrets, lying, cheating, all of it, because that's just what was going on. Now, here's a cool thing that I always say, just because there's no drama doesn't mean there's no trauma, right? So even if you can't see it, there could be underlying issues. And there were a lot of for me, there was a lot of checking out, dreaming, but for the sake of just not wanting to be in the uncomfortable moment of the behind the scenes parenting and the behind the scenes, authoritarian kind of grandma who was really just like a Cruella de Vil, was like a drill sergeant. And it was just like walking on eggshells all the time. So I would just check out. I would go do the things that are more interesting or comfortable, less boring, less scary. And mostly they're safer than being in this environment. So that's something I observed looking back. And now I see it because I was really hyperactive. I did every sport on the planet. I don't know if you remember if they had that in England, but there's a cartoon called Sports Billy. He had this giant bag with him. And in the bag was every, how do you say it? Not just every ball, but every equipment for every sport ever. Okay. And he would play all of it all the time.
You had one of them.
And I was like that. I was all over the place. I played hockey and I was skiing and soccer, handball, volleyball, running, because that's what I needed to let off steam or to process this, I don't know, this angst,
So what age were you when you left Switzerland?
I left at the age of 20. I came to visit San Diego for 6 months, did some English learning, and loved it right away. I was like, I'm home.
Yep.
And then I went back and I was working for Club Med on the Canary Islands.
I know Club Med, yep.
Which was another escape of I just need fun stuff.
Yep.
And then I went back and sold everything. And then in 92, I pretty much left Switzerland and haven't gone back just to visit. But yeah.
Okay. So what would you say from your childhood shaped you the most to who you are today, would you say?
I would say, so first the positive, right? I mean, growing up in a small town in Switzerland with healthy air, healthy food, right?
Yep.
Sports. And then also my parents were good people.
Yep.
They were at the core really good people. They always said, just be a good person, be nice, be honest, right? So I would say that was a huge influence. And my father, I remember, he was mostly passive. He had his own sort of life struggles, and he was they would say in the closet as a man. There was just a double life going on, right? We don't have to get into details, but there was the secrecy. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I would watch him interact with people. And I remember this one time, this drunken guy came up and punched him, literally hit him in the knee really hard. And he kind of fell down. And I was watching my dad, what's he going to do next? And he just stood up and he just told the guy, look, I think you should go home, So
what age were you then? Do you remember?
I was probably 8, 9.
Okay. Yeah.
And that really impacted me because I saw my father being peaceful. He wasn't reactive or violent. And so sometimes I have to remind myself. I mean, I used to kickbox. I know how to defend myself, but there's no need to get reactive. There's no need to hurt someone else. That's what I got from him.
Wow.
And he was just a very funny guy. Like, I love humor. I'm always, people say I'm fun to be around, when I get going, and we joke. And so I think those were my positive impacts. I think on the negative ones that I mentioned before was this idea of keeping secrets and sort of not showing all your cards and hiding things. And, so that's something that I'm still unlearning, is to be emotionally available, but also to tell the truth, not be a people pleaser, not be hiding things,
Yeah. So would you say that's kind of followed you into adult life a little bit
Yeah,
then? Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So before I want to go into this in detail, your book, ADHD Is Over. It says the struggle is real, the label is not. So what, just, I guess in a nutshell, you just brought this to me today, so I'm going to read this over the next few days. I'm excited. When I was researching you and found you, this is just what sprung out. I think this is a pretty powerful statement. What would you say is, just with ADHD Is Over your book, what would you say the core belief is there, if you had to kind of summarize a little bit for our listeners?
Thanks for asking, because it's easy to just take it for what it is, right? ADHD is over. A lot of people, I get a lot of pushback. People say, "Oh, you're saying it's not real." And I say, "No, read it again. I'm not saying it's not real. The struggle is real, because ADHD, we call it ADHD, but it's really, subjective observed behavior. So you're behaving in a certain way that you struggle with in life. So that's real. Like, I would never deny anyone's struggle and say, "Oh, you're stupid," or that's not true, or you're lazy. It's not that. It's that the label was made up because we, like so many things, we've created a label called ADHD. It's an abbreviation of 4 words, and who chose the 4 words? It was a committee, right? So it's made up. There's no denial in that. But what it is based on is Yoko Ono and John Lennon used to have a billboard campaign called "War is Over if you want it."
That's right.
And they were trying to make a point. Like, we don't need to have war. If you want it to be over, it would be over, right? And so I did the same thing. I said, well, looking into the future as a declaration, wouldn't any advocate for ADHD want it to be over? I think the answer is yes. Although you'd be surprised how many advocates actually benefit from having it not be over, right?
So do you mean financially, or is it like pharmaceutical?
Anything, right? Financially, pharmaceutical companies, obviously, but also a lot of experts who've built their entire careers and life on this disorder, that if it continues, they have value, or they can say that, hey, look, I told you this is real, and look, it's still real, right? So I get it. But for me, it was a declaration from the future. What if we said it's over? And what if I said it's over for my own son? And we'll get into that. But it was a matter of saying it doesn't have to be real for us. The struggle we'll deal with, right? We'll work with the behavior, and we'll do the best we can. As you know, as a dad, you figure out ways to raise healthy kids, right? If they struggle, you step in, you do what you can. What if that part we do the work, but the label we never actually slap it on? What if, right? Yeah. That was kind of how this started.
Yeah. So what would you say the biggest misunderstanding, misconception of ADHD is? Like, just generally for a parent out there who sees this everywhere, my brother included, my niece was diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, prescribed Ritalin, I believe, and that's just the way it's got to be, because that's what we're accepting. Yeah. So what's the biggest misunderstanding, do you think?
So the biggest one to me is that it's a thing. When people say, I have ADHD, they're saying it as if they had a thing in their brain that's responsible for all their struggles. Well, that's not true. That's not medically, scientifically true, because there's no like blood tests, there's no biomarkers. It's not like a tumor in your brain.
Yep.
But people see it that way. So literally that's why they say, I have ADHD. They don't say, I struggle with X behavior, right? Or my behavior seems to be kind of like what they call ADHD. People just go, I have it.
Yeah, it's just generalized.
Or I am ADHD, which is actually worse, because now you're making it your identity, right? So the biggest misconception is that, and I always say all that takes is common sense. And unfortunately, common sense is not so common anymore. But you just have to stop and go like, okay, what is it? Like, what's the thing, right? And it's really observed behaviors, because psychiatrists or psychologists or doctors, they will observe a child or do some tests, and then they will subjectively say, I think, based on the DSM's description, that this person has this thing called ADHD. So it's not actually like a disease that's medical disorders are discovered, right? You cut open, you see the tumor. Psychological disorders are invented, meaning based on observation. So that's the big misconception that I cannot stress enough, even though people are like, yeah, no, it's real.
And I was diagnosed ADHD, my first psychiatrist visit here in America, within 15 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
No test.
About average.
And then I was given 20 milligrams of Adderall, which was,
yeah,
like I said to you off camera, like just the worst thing. So what do you think is, you mentioned there about kids and behavior. What's the kind of the hardest thing or the biggest thing to kind of take away from, kids and their behavior from this? Is there anything that you would share on that? If you are struggling right now, or if you know somebody who is, please talk to somebody. Please reach out to someone. Talk to a friend or call a trusted helpline. In the US, you can reach the National Crisis and Helpline by texting and dialing 988. If you're outside the US, you can find help on findahelpline.com, and I will put all of that information in the description below. So please reach out to someone if you're struggling or if you know someone who is.
Well, so, I mean, there's the behavior, right? So there's this, what I call the struggle. So let's say a kid can't sit still in school. They can't do the homework. They don't have good grades. So you could now say that child has a disorder. They're not ordered in a way that they can function in that box, right? I would just say, okay, it's like a check engine light. Like, something's not working. What is it? Is it the home life? Is it the school that they're at? Because most parents are like, oh, this is the best school for my child. Meaning, in their opinion, that school will lead to a great, degree, success, happiness, money, whatever. Then we can die. We've done our job. Yep. Our kids are safe. So I understand that fear, the Ivy League track sort of, pressure or fear. It's real. I get it. But I would say that it's an opportunity to dig deeper and see, why is the child behaving that way? What happens in the family environment, right? What happens at school? These are all environments that the child's in. And what's funny is that kids will be at school diagnosed with ADHD and on meds, and then parents say, but we don't need to give it to them on the weekends or during vacations. Why? Because they're not at school. Oh, interesting. Huh. Unless the family, environment is also toxic or traumatic, then you could have a family's like, oh no, we need it all the time, right? Or it doesn't have to be the current family environment. It could be the past traumas in the family that are still in the system of the child or in the system of the family, transgenerational, like alcoholism, abuse, all that stuff, right? We can get more into that if you want, but basically it's the environment, the feedback from the environment that tells us something's not working. Investigate. Don't just put a pill in the kid's mouth and hope that goes away. Yeah. Because that's, to me,
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I always use this analogy. It's one of my favorite analogies. It's like a check engine light in the car, right? If the light comes on, it's telling you to look under the hood. It's not telling you to put a piece of duct tape on the check engine light. So just because you can't see the engine light, now you're fine, right? So the pills are a little bit like avoiding it, and later they still have to do the real work because there's a deeper issue,
So the book was written, the 6-year research was started with your son.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess first off, what was the early signs that didn't sit right with you and your son? 'Cause how old was your son at this?
He was about 6, going on 7.
A little bit older than mine. So yeah. So what happened? Talk us through this.
He was at a school that we thought was fairly alternative and more flexible than, it was a private school in Manhattan Beach. Again, it was one of those like, oh, it's a great school and their cousin goes there and we should go there. So it was basically just feedback from the teachers, like, oh, he's unruly, or he doesn't sit still. He kind of interrupts, My first instinct as a dad was like, well, he's 6. I mean, I interrupt people sometimes, At 6, you just don't have, unless you've been kind of formed in a family environment that maybe has sort of drilled it into you. You do not speak ever if someone else is speaking, which I know is a nice thing, right, for your adult ears, but it also creates fear, intimidation, all that stuff. So some of that feedback was like, interesting, okay. And then it was a teacher that eventually said, I think we should meet with the principal because we think something's up. And we're like, oh, okay. And that's kind of how it started.
So you got called in, the principal?
Called into the typical meeting with the principal and the teacher, and I'm sitting there with my ex-wife, my boy's mom, and they're like, yeah, we think he has ADHD. And this happens all the time where teachers or schools act as if they were the professionals that can diagnose, right? And I said, okay, well, so what do we do? And they said, well, you should get him tested. And even though I was thinking that doesn't sit right, I thought to myself, you know what, let's do it so that I know what they think, right? What is it? So we got him tested, and this took quite a while to get in. And it was 3 days of 4-hour blocks where my son had to be in this really kind of stark therapist office for 4 hours to do these really weird tests.
Old.
Yeah, 6 years old. So he's now in another environment that's like school, but even worse, I thought.
On his own? Were you able
on his own? We were waiting outside, or we walked around the blocks and stuff. But again, it's the environment also.
Yeah.
It's not fair to say, oh, he's not able to sit still for 4 hours, right? And then when he finished his tests, they would give him like sugary snacks and gluten snacks. And I'm like, great. Anyway, so he got evaluated, and they said, yep, he has ADHD. There was autism, dyslexia. There was like 6 of them. There was like a, processing disorder, something about reading, math. I mean, it was the whole spectrum of like, yeah, he's really disordered, right? And I just remember thinking, what are you talking about? Like, he's 6 years old, and he's a boy, and he's full of energy, and he's very creative, and he's very strong-willed. I'm just not going to label him as disordered, right? And they said, well, if you want to continue at the school, you need to have him medicated, because if he continues disrupting the class, we don't like that. And also he won't get the benefits of the school. And I was like, okay, well then we're not going to stay here. And I remember my ex-wife was a little bit like, oh, are you sure? I mean, this is a nice school. We're already here. It's like the middle of the school year. And I something just told me like, I can't move forward with this. And if I may insert a very small story, because this isn't about call it diagnosis or no kid ever has anything, right? This started actually when he was 3. At some point he had some issues breathing, and he had like a pneumonia type of, symptoms. And we went into the hospital, and then eventually the pediatrician said, oh, he has asthma. And I was like, at the time, I was like 3 years old. Okay, well, what do we do? Inhalers. Okay, let's do it. I guess we should do it. So we put him on inhalers. And then we had a family trip to Ecuador where their mother is from. And he was just bouncing off the walls. I've never seen anything like this. And I was like, what is going on? So I did some research into asthma medication, the ingredients and all that stuff. And what I found was just horrible. And I was like, I can't possibly, in good conscience, continue this. So again, this is a pro-intuition story, not an anti-diagnosis. I was just like, it doesn't feel right. We're going to take him off of inhalers. And when I came back to the States, went to the pediatrician follow-up, he's like, you can't do that. He has asthma. And I said, I'm sorry. So we got a different pediatrician who was more alternative, who said like, well, he's 3. Let's try it. Let's see how it goes. He's not sick right now. He's not out of breath. Let's try it. And he started playing soccer, and he did fine. And he's now 17. He's never been out of breath. He's never collapsed. He's never had any issues with breathing. That's when my questioning started.
Okay.
Because I realized we could have easily left him on inhalers for the rest of his life, and he would have needed them to function. His lungs would have now been dependent on functioning. So that, just to insert that, because again, when the ADHD diagnosis came, I was already a little bit more like, well, let's dig a little deeper. So that's how the whole thing started.
Wow. Yeah. So just going back to you get diagnosed from the school, that something's not right. So you then go on a 6-year stretch pretty much of research. So what in that time, what, I mean, obviously you can't cover everything, obviously you can read the book, but just in a nutshell, what kind of highlights in that 6 years did you find in your research?
That's a great question. I get this a lot, and I can explain it sort of in these 3 or 4 blocks. So first I started reading Tom Hartman's A Hunter in a Farmer's World. He basically has this idea that as hunters back then, you had a different brain because you needed to observe, take in all these details to be safe, to survive, to find food for the tribe, right? So these were people who, they were hypervigilant. And most likely it happened because when they first got attacked by, say, a tiger and they survived, it's kind of like, veterans that went to war. Now you're like hypervigilant. You're like, any noise, you're like, oh, gotta make sure I'm safe, right? So the part of the operating system, your brain sort of opened up to having to take in more information. And then the farmer brain is more the people that were in the village, that were planting seeds, that were harvesting. They liked structure. They just predictability, right? So the 2 different, I don't want to say 2 different brains, but 2 different wiring, or obviously there's shades, but 2 different wirings of the brain. That was his theory. So I started there. So I was like, oh, interesting. Well, my son might just be a hunter type of brain, and he's not an accountant. He's never going to be an accountant and sit down and do spreadsheets, right? So then from there, I did research on the sort of traditional mainstream side, where they're just like, oh, well, it's just, you have this thing. And I was like, okay, so I guess the brain's broken or God made a mistake, So I researched that, and it just didn't make sense. It was, the more I listened to it, I was like, well, it's not a real thing in your brain. It doesn't last for life because a lot of people outgrow it. It's not a real medical disorder. There's no blood test or anything. So eventually I started to question that, but I looked at it. So that was the second block, and I talk about this in my book. And then there was another one that a friend of mine has become a friend, but he's an Israeli researcher, an ADHD expert, who says, well, we're all different. Like, this is how your son is. That's going to be his journey. He's going to struggle with certain things that others don't, right? So that point of view also kind of made sense a little bit. Like, okay, well, I mean,
I can relate to that,
right? Yeah. Let's just see. Yeah, exactly. You're like, this is how I do life for now, and then I'll change and I'll adjust. So that was a really interesting sort of insight. And then this is Dr. Gabor Maté's take, and other experts agree. And this was my strongest sort of intuitive, it's almost like intuitively I was really gravitating towards this last one, which is that trauma in a child's life, trauma can also be called stress, a stressor. So let's say you have alcoholic parents, or you had a rough birth. They've researched circumcision, jaundice, like different things that are a trauma on the body that for one child, not a big deal. For another, so sensitive in a way that this really impacts them. So we'll never know because everybody has a different sensitivity level. Everybody's unique, right? But something affects or impacts all of us. So the theory that the trauma that sort of is stuck in a child's body or in the system, right, eventually keeps you in fight or flight mode, and you get stuck there. So you're constantly like, I don't feel safe. I need to be over there, not here. That's more interesting. I'm bored. I should be over there, So I started researching into that. And the more I talked to people that said they had ADHD, every time we go, well, what was your childhood like? Suddenly parents weren't emotionally available. There was alcoholism. There was abuse. There was all sorts of stuff, right? And then I came across a TED Talk by Nadine Burke-Harris, who used to be the Surgeon General of California. And she was a pediatrician. And she said she discovered that most kids that were sort of diagnosed with ADHD actually had childhood trauma. And the last thing I will say, I interviewed Peter Levine, who's like one of the world's leading experts in trauma research. He's now in his late 70s. And as I was interviewing him for the documentary, he hands me a diagram before we start. He didn't say anything. He just hands me a diagram, and I was like, okay. And I look at it, and it's 2 circles overlapping, and it says childhood trauma symptoms and ADHD symptoms, and the overlap was 95%.
Wow.
And he goes, I thought you should know this. And I was like, wow. So I felt I got goosebumps because my own theory that I was gravitating to was in a way I don't want to say proven, but it was at least a leading trauma expert that says you're onto something, right? With this sort of trauma and ADHD. Again, it's not to say trauma always causes ADHD, but if there's that big of an overlap, or are we misdiagnosing kids where we should do trauma healing versus medicating for sitting still, right?
So by trauma, would you say environment?
Everything. Well, trauma it comes from the Greek word, right? It means wound. So it's in a way how you interpret what happened to you. It's not what happens to you, but it's how you interpret it, and you get stuck in this like, oh, nobody loves me. I'm not good enough. This is not safe. Whatever the dialogue is, right? And it doesn't have to be physical trauma. It's usually psychological, and we get stuck there. We get stuck in this sort of negative feedback loop. So everybody has trauma. Trauma is a way for us to grow, right? You have a traumatic impact, and then you grow past it, or you grow up. And I always say, this is what you do. Your mess is your message. You go through something intense in life, now you can share it. But that's trauma, but it's not a bad thing if you overcome it. But as a kid, you need parents to help you overcome it instead of medicate you, and you'll have to deal with it later, right? That's kind of my biggest watch out. You can medicate, yes. They'll be sitting still for a couple of years. Once they're out of the house and past college, they're going to have mental health issues.
Yeah. So just going back to your son, then for the school to kind of, I guess, pinpoint saying that there wasn't something right, they obviously called you in, I did all these tests. Was there anything that you'd seen at home with your son that thought, well, yeah, something's not right? Or was it just like dismissed, that's not the case?
Good question. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely at home too. I mean, he was an intense kid to have. I remember, and I can admit this, I hit him twice. And I don't mean hit him like punched him or anything bad, but there was 2 moments that I distinctly remember where I just could not get him to, I guess, I don't want to say shut up, but he was so intense that I slapped him on the cheek, right? And it wasn't a hard slap. And I'm not a physical person that way. And I haven't ever done that again. And this was probably, when he was maybe 6 or 7. And so it was in the home too, right? It was a general, if we had medicated him, we would have not stopped on the weekends or, vacations, because he was always so strong-willed and still is. I always joke, but he's like an Elon Musk where he's like, I'm doing this, and he'll do it,
Powerful trait to have.
Yeah. And that's why we didn't want to constrain him or suffocate that. We wanted to preserve that, and at the same time, give him enough guidance that you got to make it through the system as best as you can, and then you carve out your own path. Yeah. That's kind of where we're at now.
I hear you with that. Yeah. I always jokingly say, my son, I don't think there's a human being on this earth that's tested me like my son. Every cell in my body. And he's had, his difficulties, but I think I'm just trying to understand the landscape and what's best for him. And I listen to so many YouTubes and opinions and doctors. He's in occupational therapy every Monday. And we're trying to do everything we can to get him ready now for school, kindergarten.
Yeah. Has that been an issue? Was it kind of like, oh, it could be ADHD?
I've never heard the words ADHD. We got told by his current preschool he's not developing at a pace ready for him to start kindergarten. They were worried because if he was to, little things, like development things, like he couldn't feed himself. Their terminology was, oh, he's really loved at home, we can tell. Basically, there's, yeah. But, there's definitely things I see in him that I don't know. For example, I don't see my daughter. He's just the complete contrast, chalk and cheese. I was completely different to my brother. If you ask my mum now, like my mum would say, I was definitely a challenging kid. School teachers would say I would get up in the classroom and walk away. And there was no diagnosis for me when I was at school as ADHD. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
They just said I was disruptive. So my parents were already getting called in. I wasn't a bad kid. There was no vicious bone in my body, but it was a case like, where's Robb's going? Why is he walking out of the classroom? Where you go, Robb, sit down. So there was a lot of that. Like he just doesn't know. He's just staring out the window. think of these big dreams that I had. So
yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, when I hear them talking about your son is 4, right? Mm-hmm. And he's not developing at what is the term?
At a pace ready for him to leave school.
So that's all based on some kind of normal time frame, right?
Yeah.
We call it normal because it's sort of, we've decided here's the norm, meaning the average. You know, we draw a line through all the curves, right? That's the norm, and he's not on that line. And you could be like, yeah.
Well, my comeback was my comeback to that. You know, I'm very defensive of my kids, and I was like, well, this time he was 3. I said, well, name another 3-year-old in his preschool who knows his alphabet, who can add and subtract, who can count to 100. Not one other kid here. You've got 5 or 6-year-olds who can't do that. No, we're not saying that. So we put him in. We got 2 opinions on his occupational therapy. The first one was just like completely off the chart. They wanted us to go in twice a week and charge us $400 a session and things like that. So we ended up getting. He's in now every Monday, and he's one of these people like he's got to gel with that person. Like if he doesn't gel with you, you know, a lot of it is the environment, and it's. One thing that I've had to get better in with him is, you know, I would kind of like the stern fist in like, you know, TV's got to go off now. And I've learned, you know, you can't do that to a 3 or 4-year-old. You can't just switch, the highly stimulate and switch everything off. And that's why I was kind of like this tyrant. No, it's going off. You've got to do it. But now I've got to give him that 20-minute warning, a 10-minute warning, a 5-minute warning. Like, because his little mind is, you know, where they have dopamine levels at that age, I'm not sure. But, you know, you can't just switch that off. So I learned from, it's all about how I parent, you know, and what I've been doing wrong. And I'm just constantly learning with him. And that's why he tests me in a good way.
Yeah, yeah.
So what, for you and your son specifically, what changed once you did this research? Obviously the years of going by and you're researching at this 6, 7, 8-year-old now. What's changing in his environment and his development at that?
Yeah, so early on, I realized that he's not the problem. He's just co-regulating with us, right? And I realized that in this case now, because I'm divorced, like I have to slow down. I have to, like you said, I have to look at my parenting skills or how I parent, my awareness, right? I have to put my own house in order first because he's basically looking at me going like, this is how you do it, right? What do I do, right? And if I'm anxious or if I'm like authoritarian or if I'm avoidant or if I have secrets or heights, all that stuff he can feel, or she, right? I'm just saying kids can feel or perceive way more than we think. And so I realized I have to change, not him. And the more my ex and I started doing work, as in like we slowed down, we moved to nature. We even homeschooled our kids for 2 years, which was really hard. It's hard to do. Diets changed. You know, we watch screen time a little bit more. Now they're teenagers. This is a phone is a tough one. But we really looked at all the areas of our lives and said, how can we improve all these areas? And mostly slow down and bring calm and take out as much stress and anxiety as we can. And he changed over time. I mean, his little brother told me the other day, he's like, Dad, Kai's not really hyperactive anymore. He's not really impulsive. He's not more impulsive than I am, and he can focus on things he loves and some things he doesn't like to focus on. And his brother said, but there's some things I don't like to focus on. And I said, there's things I don't like to focus on, like doing taxes or spreadsheets for me, right? So the whole point to say that, once we slowed down, once we, pulled out the stress and did the healing ourselves, and of course there's always going to be some stress, but minimizing it, he changed. Now, is that why? I can't prove that, but he's doing amazing. He's now 17. He's doing a year of high school in Ecuador right now, where his mom's from. He has a huge social network. He's very popular. He is a strong-willed, kind of like, he loves fashion, music. He's into the kind of cultural stuff. And he's just he's a very present, grounded young man who you would never guess or never even say, I think he has ADHD. And this is 10 years later, right? It's not that long. 10 years of pretty much trial and error, what works, what didn't work. I can never say the one thing that worked, but the many things we did must have worked, right? But I think the biggest one was for us to know, like, we got to do the work, you know?
As parents, it's your job. I think we forget, we're so quick to label something wrong with our kids when parents, you know, and I say this from myself, like, I need to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
It's me. It's you know, look at, and I just constantly now just, and probably you can relate to this going back into these kind of years, is so important because everything I say and do, like you say, I'm just a mirror of what can be done. So what for him, from obviously with your son now, like what takeaways have you got as your father and as a human from dealing with all this research and becoming obviously a lot more patient?
Yeah, I mean, I am going through this now where I have a partner and we're kind of early blending of families, or two similar parenting styles, but we're two different beings that come from different upbringings, right? And without going into detail what's happening there, you know, we're working through that. And what that means is for me to realize that I love to be a bit more hands-off with my kids. And sometimes that's to a detriment. Like sometimes I can be a bit avoidant of, like, I don't want to be the annoying dad. I want to be their friend, right? Like there's a fine line to walk there, and I'm working on that. But boundaries are important, right? To let them know, hey, this is cool if you go out and you do this, but if you get drunk and you throw up, you're not going out for a while. You're not doing sleepovers. You're not, you know, those kind of things, like to be clear about what's happening. That's really important. And that's the tough love, right? But not to be the authoritarian parent who's like, drugs and alcohol are wrong. More like, look, you're going to come across it, but right now, because you're not an adult yet and you live in my house, here's certain rules, and these are the consequences, right? The other one is really, you know, creating a safe space for my kids. Now come to me and say, hey, I had a sip of beer the other day at this party and I don't really like it, but and I don't go, oh my God, like, no, you should not, or, you know, I don't freak out. I just make sure that there's a safe space for them to come and share their lives with me. Because if once that's lost, once that trust is gone and they go, I can't tell dad, or I can't tell mom, you've kind of lost them. Now they're going to go to the peers. Now they don't, I can't tell dad, dad's going to freak out or mom's going to freak out, whatever. So that would be the one thing I've learned, is that, and it starts early on, because if you keep telling your child there's something wrong with you, you have ADHD, you're broken, your brain doesn't work.
Start to believe it,
right? They become almost, well, first of all, they're dependent on a drug if they take medication, right? They now need something in order to feel like they are whole, or they are accepted, or they, you know, because teachers suddenly go like, oh, you're doing a really great job. Oh, see, but without the drug, I don't get the love, right? Love from a teacher or parents. So you have to walk that fine line of like tough love and be like, you know, this doesn't work, but this is the consequence, but this is how it would work. And then you have to model it yourself, right? You can't be drinking as a parent and telling your kids you shouldn't be drinking, even if you're like, well, I'm an adult. No, you have to really, you know, climb down.
Yeah. Do you, looking back now, obviously you could have gone two ways with putting your son on medication and seeing how that would have ended up, or the connection process that you've now got. Like, looking back, how would you kind of summarize your connection now with your son versus how it would have gone if he'd gone on medication?
I think it's really that. I think had he, and of course I will never know, right? Because we didn't want him to be on medication, and B, he hated pills. He would never swallow anything, you know, even for a flu or anything, right? He would just not take pills. And he hated anything that tasted like medication. So that was good. Yeah, it helped us.
Yeah.
But I think this is me sort of speculating. Had he been on medication, I think he would have become somebody that's a bit more like a people pleaser, and like, I'm going to take the meds, I'm going to do a good job, I'm going to do this, and and this is my identity now. And who knows what would have happened, but maybe our relationship wouldn't have been as authentic. It would have been like, here, take your meds, now I love you. Now the teacher loves you. And so I feel like there might have been a bit more of a disconnect of like really being two human beings, like with flaws, right? And really connecting around, hey, you're doing okay. It would have also probably impacted me of how I love him and when I love him. So, it's hard to tell, but I'm glad we didn't. Just in our case, I'm not anti-medication. I always say Western medicine is for emergencies, but ADHD is not an emergency. It really isn't. So why come in with emergency drugs?
When you moved him out of schools and you obviously went down this path of research, did you ever hear from a school again? Did anyone ever call you and say, hey, your kids, did you ever get called back in again? No, nothing like that. So
no, we found a new school that was very child-led. They could do whatever they wanted to, literally.
Yeah.
There was no grades, no homework we were there for 2.5 years, and that was such freedom that they enjoyed and like a childhood they had.
Extreme.
It's actually down the street. It's called Play Mountain Place in Culver City.
Wow.
It's a great school. It's just like a big tree house and mud and chickens and it's amazing.
My son would love that.
Yeah, of course, right? I mean, any kid would love it because that's childhood. but so no, the school never followed up. I know they closed their doors a few years later. Why? I don't know. I can't say. But I think schools in general, other schools have kept in touch in an interesting way. Yeah.
What does a regulated home look like for you?
Great question. I would say, first of all, it's the parents leading with calm, right? We all have stressors and anxiety. It's getting worse in the world right now with all this war and financial crisis and so forth. But again, it's the parents' job right now to be the grounded sort of pillar in the eye of the storm, right? That's regulation. It's like, hey, I'm stressed, but before I go walk into the home after work, let me regulate, not with a drink, right? Not with a marijuana. Again, I don't have anything against these substances, but it's still an external substance that creates dependency and it's a crutch, right? But regulate through breath work or yoga, or maybe you take 5 minutes outside the door and you just take, 20 deep breaths and you put down your suitcase and you walk in more regulated than you showed up. Maybe you're not fully regulated, but eventually you get there. And so it's really it's almost like stress proofing or anxiety proofing the household as much as you can. Like I said, there'll always be some of it. That's a regulated home.
Okay, got it. Understand that. Yeah. I've just recently started breath work after years of dismissing it and just thinking amazing. I do it before bed. I kind of do the 4 minutes in, the hold, and then I just don't know why I've never done it before. Actually, one of my guests, Ross Sabo, which is episode 2, put me onto it, and that's how he kind of helped cure himself of mental health. So Susie, our guest last week, when we were leaving here, she gave me an app to download that every hour it goes off, and that's just 1 minute of breath work. So it's it's great. Like if you have never done breath work, or like me, always dismissed it, please don't. Just try it. For us men, fathers, how can we lead? In your idea, how can we lead in a household without controlling? Would you say? What would be your best advice there that you've got?
Wow, that's a great question. So there's a couple components, right? I always say there's resentments and secrets. That's a big part of my coaching, especially with men. Women also have resentments and secrets, but I'm a man and I have an experience in infidelity, cheating, lying, all that stuff. So I work with a lot of men. So there's resentments and secrets is stuff you want to complete. You want to have all the secrets out and all the resentments discharged, right? So you can move forward. So that's one piece of advice. That's a longer story, but whoever's listening to this, if it resonates, you'll know what I mean. I don't need to explain it. But the big part is the masculine, right? For men to step into their masculine, or I hate to say step into the masculine, that's so often used, but it's really to be mostly in the masculine energy if you identify as a man, right? For women, it's to be in their feminine, because when women switch into the masculine energy, it's because the man isn't in his masculine, the man's in the feminine, so the woman needs to take over, the woman needs to discipline, whatever. They need to sort of be in this harsher kind of way of being, which is not natural to a feminine woman. A lot of people get triggered about this. It's not about men, women. It's really, we both have both energies. So My advice would be, this is what I found, is like, be a leader and admit when you're wrong and share an emotion when it's there, right? To be emotionally available is actually masculine. We think it's from the past, right? Oh, that's weak, that's feminine. You don't share, the Stoics came in and said, like, don't show emotion. Well, maybe not, they didn't say that, but like, I feel like we've interpreted it that way. Don't show emotions. You're tough. You get up, you just, you man it, right?
Yeah, man.
Well, that's actually feminine energy in a man. We don't think of it that way. But like for me, when I'm sad or I'm triggered or whatever with my partner, I say, oh, I hate to admit it, but right now I just got like, this made me upset, or I'm jealous, or whatever it is, right? That's emotionally available. Now she feels safe that okay, you're real. You're a real human being. So now she can relax into the feminine. So not to get off course, but in a household, especially with boys, because mostly boys are diagnosed with ADHD, they need that role model. They need to see a father who comes in and disciplines, right? Who sets the boundaries. Mothers should not have to do that. Some people think that's, oh, well, you're just being traditional or conservative. No, really, energetically, there'll be a lot of mothers out there, I think right now listening, going like, yes, please, can you just come in and discipline in a loving way, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have to do it, right? So that would be my advice, is like really do some more research into what it means as a man, if you identify as a man, to be in your masculine leading the family.
So for any overwhelm, and being a father is so overwhelming. For any overwhelming fathers and dads out there, what would you say to them right now?
It's what you said, find your jam, how you can regulate, because overwhelm is essentially like anxiety, fear. You're worried about the future. You're not letting go of something from the past. You're not really present, right? So how can you get present? Like breath work, right? Meditation, yoga. There's so many. Here's one thing I will say. There's no one size fits all. As much as you and I both like to say, hey, this is how you do it, and this is how you do it, and this works for me, and that's exciting, it may not work for someone else. So always tell my boys, you may not know what works, but just turn your back on what doesn't work and keep moving forward, and you'll find it. And I'm glad you found breath work. For me, that worked for a while. Now I have this chanting, breath worky prayer kind of mix that works. But that next year I may find something else. Yeah. But when it works, right?
Constantly evolving, yeah.
Yeah.
So for, those overwhelmed fathers listening, I guess there's been many a time where, I don't know if you can relate to this as a father, anyone listening, I constantly felt like I've failed as a father on failing versus, and like, what could I do better? And I always ask this, like, as somebody who is always looking for advice of people, I open advice. I'm my biggest critic. What would you want them to know? What would you want any father out there who's potentially feels like he's failing right now?
Yeah, that's you have great questions. I really appreciate that.
Sorry to put you on the spot. No, I'm always on the spot.
No, I love that spot. This is a big one because, first of all, if you're asking that question, you're a great father.
Okay.
You would not be asking that question.
Okay.
You would be like, I'm fine. I'm doing my thing, right?
Definitely not for me.
So any man watching this or listening to this who's asked that question, I would just say, you're doing great. You're on the right track. Because I'm the same way. And then the second question is a little cheekier, which would be, what other father are you comparing yourself to such that you think you're doing less of a job than
Probably my own.
What's your...
Yeah, my benchmark is my own dad, my own father.
Because you appreciated how he raised you?
I mean, he was somebody who worked his ass off, and he wasn't maybe present, like, because just times were different, and right, the dad would go out and he'd work, and some days he would drive 2 hours to work and 2 hours just to provide. So his idea of providing back in the 80s is very different to how I provide today.
Yeah.
Mine is more being present. Like the biggest thing you get told as a father is, oh, it goes quick. Oh,
it does.
And it does go quick. And I think it goes even quicker if you're not present. I've been able to set up everything I do in life, and whether this is right or wrong, and I this is a difference of opinion, is around my kids. So the way I work, how many hours I work, what hours I work, it starts, and everything is built around my kids. So I take my kids to school and pick them up every day. Every meeting is centered around that. Nothing, like if you want to meet me, today's off this week, but if you want to meet me at 12:30 on a Tuesday, it's not happening. Why? Because I'm picking my son up from preschool.
Yeah.
You know, same bath. You know, my friends, let's go out for 8 o'clock. Not happening. I don't have a social life anymore. That's my choice. Because every night I bath the kids. I put my daughter to bed, and that's just a principle of choice.
Yeah.
But I find that by doing that now, my time, I don't want to ever think, well, your time's going so fast. So I think from my dad, he set up a benchmark because I was very close to him. So he's my benchmark.
Right.
You know, he was my hero. So I guess you can only compare it as, will my son see me how I see my dad? So that's the benchmark.
Well,
it's the big shoes to fill. You know?
The answer would be no, because you're two different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, you're standing on his shoulders, so you're gonna do better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean better as in there's no competition, but you're gonna have more awareness than he did simply because we're evolving as a species, right?
Yeah.
So, but I totally get the question. We always have this feeling, and the reason why I asked that is because social media is also a big influencer, and people going like, "Well, look at that dad with a YouTube video, and he's so loving, and his wife," and it's like it's a video. They edited it. They have bad days. He's not perfect, you know. But we create this image of like the perfect man or father, and we're not there yet. And it's kind of like a carrot on a stick, you know. It's we're here, we're who we are, and we're doing the best. You're doing the best you can. I'm doing the best I can. And are there days when my partner points something out and I go, I'm a fucking complete failure. I'm so unaware and I'm afraid of setting boundaries. Like I'm just a spineless little guy, you know, but that's not true. That's just not true. I have great children, and I'm all my friends tell me like, wow, you're such a great dad and you love your kids. They love you. So don't listen to yourself about that. Ask other people. If you're curious, if you're doing good, ask your friends, hey, what do you think of me as a dad? Be honest, you know?
Yeah.
They'll tell you.
Yeah. I think, for the most part, I think I just want to be available. And there's a very fine line with being, my wife will say to me, you treat, she's 17 months now, but you treat her so much different. And I said, well, yeah, it's my little girl.
Yeah.
That's my girl. That's my,
Yep.
you know, and I posted something on my social media the other day. There was a meme and like 8 points about being a girl dad. And number 8 was like, I'll happily do jail time. So, you know, and I highlighted that, and I will. I've said that from day one. Like, you hurt her, I'll take the time in prison. So just beware. So but the way I would treat obviously my son is very different because he's my boy. But Roman, thank you so much for being here and so open today. I'm going to read this book. I'm going to put the link in our description where you can buy this book. It's on Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm going to definitely read this. There's a lot more I want to dive into there. So excited to kind of get into that. Your journey really is a reminder that it doesn't start with a diagnosis, right? It starts when a man is willing to look inward and take responsibility. Okay, so when men return to themselves, they return to their families. That's what it's all about. Walk with me, brother. But any final thoughts you want to just share quickly with our viewers today? Anything that I've missed?
I just thank you for having me on, and I just acknowledge you for doing what you're doing. I think it's very much needed right now. I think young men are struggling. Men in general are struggling. I speak for the men. I know women are struggling too. Everyone's struggling. But I just appreciate what you do. And I would say the last thing I can just say is like, look, everyone's unique. No one's special, meaning we're not special, more special, less special. We're all unique. And really, it's just supporting our sons or our kids to find their unique path and just be there with love. And that's it. They can't fail.
Awesome. One other question I might edit in later. So it's not really, this is not for the ending, but did you get, when this has come out, did you get a lot of pushback from doctors or anything like questioning this research, like doctors saying you're not a doctor or anything like, did you get like a lot of?
Yeah. I get that a lot. I get that weekly on comments, social media, podcast. Yeah. And I always do episodes about loving my haters, and I just explain where they come from and where I come from, so the listener can kind of figure out, if I ever meet someone like that, these are my talking points. This is what I could say as a parent, you know. But no hate. But I get a lot of pushback because they're like, you're not an expert. You're not, you don't have education in it. I do. I'm an expert in my son, and I have 10 years of research in ADHD. I have some education, you know.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you, my man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it. That was awesome.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.